morning. Oh, it is Thursday, January 13th, 2022, and we have snow. We have a lot of snow. We have way too much snow. Yeah. Yeah. We need to dig it out. So I've been informed by a young earth creationist that I have a God. I had not known this. I had assumed that because I was an atheist that I don't have a God. I also assumed that because the ancient Egyptians worship many gods, that they were not atheists, because atheist means without gods. And the Egyptians were very God-ridden. They had many gods. But apparently they were atheists, despite the fact that they had thousands of gods. And apparently I have a God. And my God's name is Joe. J-O-E. Joe. Wow. I had not been aware of that. And apparently this Joe tells me when to get up in the morning, when to go to bed at night. He tells me what to eat, what to wear, and what to think. And he tells me that I have to dye my hair pink. And he tells me that I have to say really silly things. Things that I really don't feel like saying because they're just so nonsensical. But I have to say them. I'm not sure why I have to say these absurd things, but I have to say them. And I have to say them continuously. And of course, these are all things that I've never said in my life, but apparently Joe tells me every day to say these things, and I say them. I did not know that. So either I don't know me, and I don't know anything about me, or this young earth creationist does not know me and does not know anything about me and does not know anything about atheists or atheism. Of course, the same young earth creationism insists that evolution is the metamorphosis of caterpillar through the pupa stage to the adult stage in butterflies. That's evolution, which it's not. Okay? That is not evolution. That is metamorphosis. There is no genetic change. It's all genetically encoded in the caterpillar to become a butterfly. That is not evolution. Of course, then again, I've had creationists tell me that a child growing to an adult is evolution. Again, no, it's not. It's not evolution. Changing your clothing is evolution. No, it's not. It's not evolution. And so I find that I must once again explain evolution to a creationist. Okay, one more time. Evolution is a genetic change, not a change of appearance, not an adaptation of behavior, but a genetic change, which is then inherited and passed on to the next generation. In order for this to happen, the genetic change has to be either neutral or beneficial. It can be detrimental, but still have some short-term benefit. For instance, the sickle cell trait is a genetic characteristic. It does cause a condition called sickle cell anemia in 0.1% of all people who carry it. That's 1 in 1,000. However, in exchange, the sickle cell trait protects against malaria. So you don't get malaria. Malaria is a fatal condition. It destroys you. On the other hand, sickle cell trait only gets you if you are that unlucky 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000. So literally, you have a village of 1,000 people, only one of them is going to be knocked down by sickle cell anemia. The others, who all carry the sickle cell trait, don't get sickle cell anemia. But they also don't get malaria. And if they're living in a part of Africa that is rife with malaria, sickle cell trait is a useful trade-off. You sacrifice one person out of every 1,000. And in exchange, you have a healthy population. Yeah. That's evolution, a genetic trait that may or may not have harmful consequences, but for the most part is beneficial, or at least neutral. The genetic tendency towards some people to have blue eyes is a genetic trait. And it too was selected for, not by survival, but by attractiveness, a very superficial benefit. Blue eyes were novel, new, interesting, exciting, and attractive. And people who had them were considered interesting enough that other people wanted to mate with them, thus making a lot of babies with the genetic tendency towards blue eyes. The same with sickle cell trait. The people who survive in the malarial swamps without dying from malaria are more attractive to other people than the people who are dying of malaria. They're more likely to mate, they're more likely to mate successfully, they're more likely to pass on their genetic trait, which is the sickle cell trait. That is evolution. The passing of genetic traits, new genetic traits, through a population. Not metamorphosis, not growth, not adaptive behavior. That's not evolution. Evolution is genetic. Genetic. And the fact that we still have to explain this to creationists after all these years is exasperating. Really. Why do we have to keep explaining this to them? Haven't they figured this out? We've been telling them for decades. Why aren't they cluing in? Wow. Another thing, this same creationist who insisted that I have a god named Joe, and who insisted that a butterfly growing from a cocoon is evolution, also insisted that climate change is the cycle of the seasons, the 4 seasons, spring, summer, autumn, winter. No, that's not climate change. That's climatic stability within a yearly cycle. That's not climate change. Climate change is when you suddenly have an inexplicable drought that lasts for 30 to 50 years in an area that has traditionally enjoyed between 18 and 30 inches of rainfall every year. Now you're getting maybe an inch a year, if that, consistently for decades. That is climate change. Climate change is when your average summer highs are 1.5 degrees higher than they've ever been before, and that this has been an ongoing growth over the past several decades. Climate change is not when it suddenly rains during the rainy season. I wish that creationists could tell the difference between normal weather and abnormal weather. really wish that they could. Unfortunately, they can't. And they seem to think that we share their failings, their shortcomings. Neighbors talking. Yeah. So, what to do about this creationist? How do you educate someone like that? How do you explain it to them? Really, how do you get a young earth creationist to accept basic reality? I do not have a God. I do not have a God named Joe. Evolution is not the same as metamorphosis or changing your clothing or growing up from childhood. Climate change is not changing weather pattern, changing weather within a cycle. Honestly. How do we explain this to young earthers? How do we get young earthers to grasp basic reality? I don't know. And I don't know if we're ever going to find out. Take care.